Have a day today, dog. Offense, great drive.
Go!
He's up.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Training Camp Live, presented by Honda.
Here we are in Spartanville, South Carolina, here, Training Camp Live, presented by Honda. Ethan Greenberg, Eric Allen, Leger Douzable on set. The Jets have a pair of joint practices with the Carolina Panthers. Today is the padded practice. It's the juicy practice for all I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You love it, right? Because you get to see the Jets compete against another team in another color. This is how coaches evaluate the talent on their current roster, right? Going up against another team, intensity ratchets up. Intensity gets a little bit more aggressive. I can't wait to see these guys go out here and compete today.
The return of the Mac and the loudspeakers and the return of the Deuce here.
Douzable, we've broken down the Jets throughout training camp. Training camp's longer this year, of course, with the Hall of Fame game. We had Brian Baldinger on our last live show, and he was kind of giving a preview of the Panthers. He was saying, watch out for Brian Burns, who's now wearing number 0, by the way. He changed from 53 to 0. When you take a look at this Panthers team, what are the matchups as a Jets fan that they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, definitely the one with Brian Burns and the offensive tackles for the Jets, right? That's one of the concerns going into this week of practice. I believe Robert Saleh came out and said he kind of wants to name that starting five. So you want to see that group build continuity and come together. Still waiting for Dwayne Brown to come back. But Brian Burns is one of the best edge rushers in all of football. So this will be a great test for the offensive tackles for the New York Jets. So that's one matchup I definitely want to see. I also want to see Bryce Young versus this top 5 defense, right? All the things you saw at Alabama, right? I've talked to a few of the coaching staff from the Carolina Panthers. They say what you saw at Alabama is what you see right here on this practice field. Guy throwing with anticipation, who has great pocket savvy, knows how to move around. And I know Ethan and EA, people have always questioned his height, right? But he's been the same height his whole career, so he's had to learn to throw from different angles, throw from different side angles. So I'm real interested to see Bryce Young versus our defense today.
We're watching the Jets quarterbacks warm up right now. It is a trio of signal callers because the Jets recently waived Chris Streveler. Tim Boyle, the team's third quarterback. Robert Saleh made some news today. I don't think it really was news breaking as far as the quarterback position. Aaron Rodgers is not playing Saturday night against the Carolina Panthers. Zach Wilson will indeed get his second consecutive start here in the preseason. Something I want to follow up on as far as the tackle position. Saleh addressed Dwayne Brown today when he was asked specifically, is it the shoulder or is it conditioning? Because he started camp on the PUP list. He said it's a little bit of both. And he kind of walked back the timetable, joking with Jets PR head Eric Gelfand about, hey, listen, don't give a specific time because we'll have to see how this all plays out. Again, very encouraged about where he's at, but he also said, dudes, got to be in football shape before you start playing in the regular season.
100%, and that's the thing. You can be in great shape off the field, but the only way to get into football shape, Ethan and EA, is by actually going out on this practice field and playing and getting the reps in, right? Again, I always felt like I was in the best shape of my life coming into camp, and then after the first practice, I was like, what was I doing all off the season? I'm breathing heavy. I want to take these shoulder pads off, dripping in sweat. So Robert Saleh makes a great point. Dwayne Brown is getting up there in age, right? You want to make sure that he's not only healthy, but you want to make sure that his physical nature is ready to take on a 17, game schedule. So it could be some time before we see him, and that's one of the things that he was talking about right before practice. And I know, again, he wants to really get this starting 5 group together sooner than later so they can really build that rapport. But with Dwayne Brown coming back slowly, it's going to seem like it's going to be a little bit longer before they finally pick that starting 5 for the offensive line.
Just a couple other injury updates, I guess, from Robert Saleh. He said that Sauce Gardner won't practice. That's precautionary. Sauce felt something. He didn't really disclose what that was in the media availability. Decided to hold him out. Carl Lawson continues to not practice with the back tightness. Garrett Wilson, who a couple days ago, we thought we were going to see him in Tuesday's practice at One Jets Drive. He remains out, but he's starting to integrate back in. He will not take any team reps when the Jets and Panthers square off. Leger, we started the show saying this is the juicy day with the pads. What kind of work can both these teams accomplish in today's practice versus tomorrow's practice with just helmets?
Yeah, the thing is you still want to work on your fundamentals. That's what it comes down to. And you hear that coaches say all the time, right? Learn how to practice like pros. And that's when you take the pads off, you got to learn how to practice like pros because you essentially have to take care of each other. Now, again, it's another color. You want to play a little bit more intense than them, but you got to back that off, right? Because it's all about working on your fundamentals. You can still get good work without having the pads on. Today, you're going to see a lot of banging and clanging, but tomorrow it's all about more mental than anything.
C.J. Mosley said yesterday before the team departed for South Carolina, this will feel like a game. This is like the first time that first unit is going to get game reps. The number one priority for the New York Jets over these 2 days, a clean bill of health.
Yeah, for sure.
And with Sauce Gardner not practicing and Bryce Hall also not practicing, the Jets do have a little bit of shortage of numbers at the cornerback position for these 2 days if Sauce doesn't practice tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And one guy who's had a pretty impressive camp we haven't talked about him is Jimmy Moreland. He's had a couple interceptions. We can discuss him a little bit later. From the Jets' perspective today, Leger, we had talked about this when the Jets and Packers practiced 2021.
Yep.
You could see the Packers were a couple years ahead of the Jets. Is that what you want to see from the Jets today, where the Jets would be the 2021 Packers and the 2021 Eagles, for that matter, where you see that they're a step ahead of a team that has a new head coach, has a new coaching staff, and a new quarterback?
Yeah, you want to see some growth. I don't know necessarily you want to see that distance between the Packers and where the Jets were a few years ago. So I think this Carolina Panthers team has done a really good job of overturning this roster. Yes, it's a rookie quarterback, but Frank Wright has been a consummate pro at the head coaching position from his days with the Indianapolis Colts. You see their staff comprised of a lot of ex-players, right? So these guys have been here. They're relatable to all the other players. So I want to see the Jets take a step and compete, right? To me, it's more about the Jets, not about the Carolina Panthers. It's all about working on your fundamentals to get better. And like C.J. Mosley said, this is like game-like situation. So can you take that step in that type of situation?
Great production right now because we just saw a split screen before. Now we're focused in on Aaron Rodgers. You watched Hard Knocks last night. You watched One Jets Drive on Monday. What have you thought about getting behind the scenes from what you've seen from Rodgers so far?
Yeah, I love what I've seen from Aaron Rodgers. He just seems like he's revived since he's come to the New York Jets. Seems a little bit more chipper. He even kind of joked with Saleh on the sideline in the Hard Knocks, like, we got to be a little bit more positive here, guys. And, Robert Saleh was just joking around, talking about Zach Wilson's stuff. Like, I thought I could have went for a touchdown. He's like, man, it's a 50-plus yard play. Let's have a little bit of positivity. But I love the relationship he has with Zach Wilson. You've seen the growth from Zach Wilson. I think that's something that has been missing in Zach Wilson's career, like a true vet that he can look up to, that he literally grew up looking to, that kind of tabled his game after, right? Aaron Rodgers was a guy, like you talked about 2 years ago, they practiced, and he talked to him there because it was a guy he looked up to. Now he gets him every single day. And I love the behind-the-scene things when, even as simple as Zach Wilson taking a snap, if Aaron Rodgers feels like he maybe didn't open up the right way or didn't take the right footstep, he goes to him right away and corrects that. Where before, I don't believe that was happening with Zach Wilson. So we saw the growth in the Hall of Fame game. Looking forward to see Zach Wilson compete out here today with the Panthers, and then also Saturday versus them in the preseason game.
How about this guy right here?
Great opportunity for Mekhi Becton right now. Robert Saleh, very encouraged about where he's at, and he said yesterday at a very good practice. So let's see if he can come back today and have a big outing against the Panthers.
I think the good thing is, even though he only took about 7 or 8 snaps in that preseason game, he didn't miss the next practice. He was there, so that was the concern, right? How would he recover from game-type reps? Would he be able to go? We know there's some discomfort in the knee, but him being able to practice those 2 straight days and then dress for today, I think will be big for not only his confidence, right, but his maturation into going into a 17-week season, saying, I have the confidence in the knee. I know there's going to be a little discomfort, but I can play through it.
And remember, this is a kind of a full circle moment for him because his first game since 2021 against the Carolina Panthers at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte was last week against the Cleveland Browns. Leger, before we get back to you, let's actually head to Caroline Hendershot on the field.
Here with Trevor Sikkema of PFF. Trevor, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate the time.
Of course. Appreciate you having me.
We have a Charlotte native in the house, so you're used to this heat, whereas I am not.
I am. I also grew up in Florida, so heat is just like in my blood, if you will. Honestly, this isn't too bad, but I don't want to say that to you because I know you guys are from Northeast, so it's I know y'all are battling out here, but that's what joint practices are all about.
The sweat is dripping off my face already, so we're off to a hot start. But Trevor, this is your first Panthers practice this season. What do you like out of this team so far?
Well, I like, honestly, I just like a lot of the changes that they made throughout the offseason. I mean, I love the coaching staff that they brought in. I think it's going to bring the most out of a really young group that was kind of up and coming. We know the rest of the roster was pretty close up to playoff caliber speed, but they were just missing the quarterback. Now, not only did they change things amongst the coaching staff to, I think, get the most out of the rest of the roster, but you add Bryce Young into the mix. I'm really excited to see what he's able to do with his teammates up against the Jets at these joint practices. And so this is what it's all about, right? We saw him shine while he was at Alabama. Now let's see what he's all about kind of coming to the NFL. And I think he's going to hit the ground running, and that's what I'm looking forward to most about these practices.
So the Jets, while they sat over 30 players last week against the Browns, they did get some reps, and a lot of their team that probably don't get a lot of playing time got to see that time on the field. What did you see out of those players, and what did you like from them?
Yeah, so I mean, two rookies that really stood out to me. The first is Izzy Abanikanda, right? And I think a lot of people were really excited about him. A lot of fantasy people normally are. When there's a young, fast running back that comes into the league, they really gravitate towards that kind of a player. And so I think that getting to see him in that Hall of Fame game was nice. Obviously, like, didn't blow the stat sheet up or anything, but he's really important for this team because I know they don't want to rush Breece Hall back, right? It's a long-term plan with what they have with Breece Hall. They want to be competing in November and December and getting into January. So how well he performs, not just at the Hall of Fame game, but here at joint practices, here throughout the rest of preseason, that's going to mean a lot to, okay, maybe they do bring a veteran in. Maybe they don't bring a veteran in. Maybe they think that he's good enough to really kind of be the head of that committee while they're getting Breece Hall back. So he was somebody who I like the fact that he kind of like hit the ground running, full pun intended, and it was good to see him out there in that first game. The other one's Joe Tippmann, their interior offensive lineman. I like Joe Tippmann coming out of Wisconsin because he's not your typical center. He's a very big center prospect. So normally that's not great, but with the Jets, you look at their offensive line overall, and there's so much versatility. There's so many, okay, this guard can also play tackle. This center can also play guard. There's so much moving parts along their offensive line that for a team that's going to be competing for games later in the season, into January, into the postseason, they hope, injuries happen. But when you have that versatility along those guys, getting that experience like what we saw from Tippmann in that first game, that's huge. And I think that that's going to be a big part of the depth of what makes this team one that can survive the regular season and play really well, hopefully into the postseason as well.
Now, last one for you, Trevor. As these teams begin practice as we speak, what do you think is the biggest takeaway that both teams are going to get from these joint practices? Because we've heard coaches and players all week talk about how sometimes the joint practices are even better than preseason games for them.
Yeah, no, totally. It's totally a cliche, but it is all about the trenches for all of these teams because you listen to these players and they'll all say the same thing. Well, we're tired of hitting our teammates, right? We're tired of hitting our friends. Now we get to go up against a different team. And, you know, when it's a game format, things are a little bit different. But in practices, there's all these different types of reps. You can try different things against the other team, and you just don't get those kinds of exact opportunities in the game. So the trench play is the biggest thing because that's truly where you figure out how teams are going to be out of the starting gate in week one. And when you get this practice where defensive lines and offensive lines get to go full throttle, they're not hitting their teammates. They get to really show what they're about. That, to me, is the most valuable part of joint practices. And, again, what I'm looking forward to most is seeing how these teams are in those trenches.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the insight, Trevor. We really appreciate the time.
Of course, guys.
Caroline, Trevor, appreciate the time. You're watching Training Camp Live, presented by Honda. Ethan Greenberg, Eric Allen here in Spartanburg, South Carolina, as the New York Jets and the Carolina Panthers start the juicy part of practice. We're taking a look at one-on-ones here, the green and white, and I don't know what you call the white and blue here. Laken Tomlinson getting into it.
Locking it up.
Shy Tuttle, number 99 for the Carolina Panthers.
This week, Jets are going to benefit from seeing a different defensive front because the Panthers, of course, they're a 3-4 front, and the Jets all week, I mean, throughout training camps, they're facing a 4-3 every day.
Right there, Marquand McCall against Connor McGovern. See, this is Connor McGovern, we've talked about this, a more agile center. When you're going up against a big nose tackle, defensive tackle like that, to me, that would be the mismatch for Connor McGovern. But the Jets like to run a lot of outside zone stuff, which obviously is a benefit, having 60 in there.
Yeah, and a couple things, a couple notes here on the center position as we're watching Jets stud.
Derek Brown.
That's a great matchup that we will continue to watch throughout the week because that was not just Derek Brown, that was Elijah Vera Tucker. And again, you're going to be seeing a lot of that, Derek Brown versus Elijah Vera Tucker.
That's Billy Turner right there against the Penn State products, Yetur Gross Matos. Great story.
There you go. A shout out to Tony Mancuso back at the facility, Penn State. But, yeah, the center position is interesting because Joe Tippmann, Robert Saleh said, very pleasant surprise as far as the way he played. He played against the Cleveland Browns, just because it's normal for a rookie to have ups and downs in the National Football League early, but he got extended action, and let's see if he can jump off of that performance.
Right there was Tristan Colon against former New York Jet Henry Anderson, Big Hank, a member of the Carolina Panthers.
He's atop the depth chart there for them at the defensive end position. And you mentioned Brown before. It's interesting that he's listed as a defensive end, but he said, make no mistake, I'm still a defensive tackle in a 3-4.
That's Wes Schweitzer at the center position, getting into it.
All right.
That was Nick Thurman for the Carolina Panthers. We're taking a look right here at a split screen. This is the juice. On the right side of your screen, you get the Jets D-line, the Panthers O-line. On the left side, you get the Panthers D-line and the Jets O-line, which is where we're currently more situated.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's give people some insight as far as where we're at. We're a couple yards away from where the offensive line, the Jets' offensive line, is matching up with the Panthers' defensive line.
We have a great corner of shade here in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which I feel very thankful for. However, we were told you get to trade the sun for no bug bite. So basically, if you want to stay in the shade, you get bitten up. There was Max Mitchell.
Mitchell getting that rep at the left tackle position. At the left tackle position, right. And we've seen those guys flip throughout camp, meaning Max Mitchell and also Billy Turner, of course.
That was a nice rep right there, Laken Tomlinson and Shai Tuttle of the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, we've seen those guys go at it a couple times here so far in this drill.
That's Joe Tippmann. Joe Tippmann's really come on strong, I felt like. And I do think Robert Saleh alluded to it, that he was a pleasant surprise. And when we had Baldy on, it seemed like Joe Tippmann played a near stellar game. Although it was in the preseason, still impressive.
Yep. No doubt about that. And what the Jets like about the offensive line, too, is they're looking for position flexibility. And we saw Schweitzer before. Schweitzer is a guy who can line up at center and guard as well.
If you're taking a look at this right now, I thought that was 53, which it is not, but it's just, if you missed it earlier, Brian Burns is now wearing number 0, not 53. And this is Mekhi Becton, Brian Burns, who just spun around the big ticket there.
Listen, Burns is one of the most talented pass rushers in the National Football League. In 4 seasons, Greens, 38 sacks. You're talking about a guy who was a Pro Bowler last year, 12.5 sacks.
He just gets better with time, Brian Baldinger said. He had 9 sacks 2 years in a row. He's a back-to-back Pro Bowler for the Panthers. And that was a nasty spin move right there. But, you know, you got to give credit where it's due. Just like right there, Connor McGovern, although the referee threw the flag there. So
a little holding penalty there on the Jets veteran center.
And also what I really like about Dwayne Brown, even though he's not practicing, he's talking to the offensive line right now. And we're taking a look at the Jets defensive line and the Panthers O-line. Right now, there's not a lot of action going on, though. What's the best matchup for this Jets defensive line, do you think? Also, not for nothing, Brian Burns, I don't know his height weight off the top of my head, but he's got a similar frame to somebody like 99, Will McDonald, where he can use his length to spin and speed. Right there. That was a good rep for the Carolina Panthers. But 97 is Pita Taumo-Penu, the XFL Defensive Player of the Year. 97 used to be Isaiah Mack.
Yeah, the Jets have made a number of roster moves the last couple of days.
They have.
And he's one of those new acquisitions.
What great last name. Taumo-Penu, 7.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. Solomon Thomas working the inside there against the Carolina Panthers.
And that was Lincoln Tomlinson, I believe, as well, on the split screen on the opposite side.
I'm excited to see what these team periods will have.
Nice stop by Schweitzer right there. Stonewalling the Panthers defender. I think we're going to see a rep with Joe Tippmann coming up as well.
On the right side of your screen, I believe it is Will McDonald working on the inside there. Number 65 for the Carolina Panthers. J.D. Dorenzo. That's a great last name. Dorenzo.
Okay.
EA, over under 1.5 scuffles here between the Jets and the Panthers.
Definitely taking the over.
You're going overs,
Yeah,
so at least 2.
We're just starting right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little hot. Not for us right now because we're in the shade, but it's toasty. The heat in South Carolina a little different than the heat in Florham Park.
Leger Douzable was here a moment ago watching the Jets offensive line, and he dipped out. He's watching the Jets defensive line right now. There's a rep for veteran tackle Billy Turner, I believe.
That's exactly who
who, like you mentioned, we also see Dwayne Brown in the shot here, too. Now, he's a guy who's on PUP. Robert Saleh was asked about him today. Again, why is he on PUP? Because conditioning, a little bit of both, conditioning and the shoulder.
Yeah, we'll see what the timetable is for Dwayne Brown's return. But, I feel like everyone we've spoken to, everyone's most interested in the offensive line in terms of whether it's Leger, whether it's Brian Baldinger, and rightly so because the Jets want to get their best 5 out there. But they're also in the middle of a competition up front, out wide at tackle. Dwayne Brown hasn't practiced. In your opinion, EA, how imperative is it for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who is not going to play Saturday against the Carolina Panthers, to know who his 5 are to start to develop a chemistry up front?
Well, yeah, you want to have continuity along the offensive line. We saw what happened to the Jets' offensive line last season with the injuries they endured. Brown's going to be the guy to watch over the next couple weeks when he can possibly return. And if it's not him, then we've been seeing Max Mitchell and Billy Turner. But the guy that I'm circling 77 again here today because we talked about Mekhi Becton at the top of the show. But, again, this is just another step for him in the process. And Saleh did say that he had one of his better practices yesterday. So now it's doubling it up, tripling it up, and then going out there and playing well against the Panthers on the natural grass Saturday night.
Nice rep there from Michael Clemens on the right side of your screen. And I said it earlier, I'm just going to rehash it and clarify myself. The reason why Saturday, or really these practices, are full circle for Mekhi Becton is because his first game, the game where he first hurt his knee, was 2021 Week 1, Zach Wilson's first game in the NFL in Carolina, in Charlotte. And he got hurt that game. Obviously, last year he got hurt in training camp. Now this is coming full circle here, being back in Carolina, although right now in Spartanburg. Then the team will drive to Charlotte on Friday before taking on the Panthers in preseason action on Saturday. I'm interested to see if Bryce Young is slated to play Saturday against the Jets, because right now Frank Reich, we haven't heard him speak to the media, haven't heard anything about it, but I'm interested to see how Bryce Young specifically handles himself, not only against this Jets defense in terms of the secondary, but really how Bryce Young handles himself against the Jets defensive line, because this is really the best matchup for the rest of practices. EA, what do you think about this Jets defensive line getting after Bryce Young?
Listen, Bryce Young, number 1 overall pick in the draft. He's had a great camp to date. That's what we're hearing. So now he's going to be facing a hungry pack of wolves, that Jets defensive line, getting after him. So, again, he's a valuable experience for him, because you're going against a top defense, and the Jets are talking openly about, hey, we want to make the jump next season, not only being for top 5 defense, but perhaps taking that to the next level and being the number 1 defense in the National Football League, an elite defense.
You're watching Training Camp Live, presented by Honda. Now joined on set, Caroline Hendershot. I know you're usually the one holding the mic, but now we're going to have some fun, because you're going to be the one being asked some questions here. Caroline, what is the matchup that you want to see the most, whether it's today's practice or tomorrow's?
That's a good one. I think I'm looking at our cornerbacks, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, going up against the wide receivers of the Carolina Panthers. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how much they've developed and just the next step that they're going to continue to take, because obviously they're so good and they're so talented, but I just think that there's another level for Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed this year, and it's going to be interesting to see what that next step looks like and how much they can limit wide receivers this year. But I would say both of our guys against the Panthers wide receiver group.
Right now, it seems like the Jets and Panthers going through a special teams period. And you would imagine after that, the Jets will be going against team periods against the Panthers, which we will not be able to show here on Training Camp Live, presented by Honda for obvious reasons, because we don't give away state secrets here as working for the New York Jets, and we don't want to give away the Carolina Panthers secrets either. EA, because there's a special teams period going on, it's only right to talk about this. Justin Hardy, the Jets know what they have in him. The Jets know what they have in Thomas Morstead, Greg Zuerlein. What do you want to see from Xavier Gipson, Jason Brownlee, guys that are fighting for this roster? I know I just listed 2 receivers because everyone likes receivers, but what do you want to see throughout these practices that could cement a roster spot for them in a couple weeks when the Jets and all 32 teams go from 90 players to 53?
Well, I thought Gibson had a good practice offensively yesterday, and he's getting more confidence with the quarterbacks. You're seeing 82 get more involved out there with his reps offensively, but as far as special teams are concerned, we saw his bounce back where he muffs a punt against the Browns. He comes back with that long kickoff return that sets up Greg Zuerlein's field goal before halftime. For him, he's got a fantastic opportunity. He's got to keep on pushing, but he's a guy who at Stephen F. Austin had 4 return touchdowns, and he was a dynamic offensive player. So you want to see him continue to make a push.
Okay, so we have one final question here. Just going to go out on a limb. This is like all in or not today, which obviously we'll get to in the regular season. I'm going to start with UEA, then we're going to go Caroline, then I'm just going to go me, then we'll wrap. After these 2 joint practices, the player that the Jets media and Jets fans are going to be talking about a little more because of how well they performed is who?
Aaron Rodgers. I'm serious. I'm serious because you're not going to see Aaron Rodgers Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I think people are going to pay more attention to this Jets-Panthers practice than just the regular Jets practice, which is getting a ton of attention in its own right. But I anticipate Aaron Rodgers come out here smoking and throwing dimes because he's not going to be playing Saturday night.
Yeah.
And every time it's a bigger stage, even though this is a practice for a guy entering his 19th year in the National Football League, I think people are going to be talking more about Aaron Rodgers.
I love that
if that's
answer.
even possible.
I don't know what the YouTube comments say. If they're saying that's a cop-out, I don't care because that's a great answer. Caroline, where are you going?
I'm going to go undrafted free agent Jason Brownlee because I think he's had some stellar practices and he's really showed off what he's able to do. And, I mean, even Coach Saleh was saying the Jets were trying to get him in the 3rd day of the draft. So I think that he's someone who's going to really explode in games because you saw in the Browns game, he didn't have that much production, but he's just getting his feet wet. And so I think more practices under his belt, he's going to pop off at these 2 practices with the Panthers. And then Saturday's game, I think, should be a big one for him if he's ready to take that next step on the big stage.
You went offense, EA. Carolina went offense. I feel like it's only right to go defense here. I'm going to go with Jermaine Johnson. He came out of training camp very hot, had a nice couple practices, and then feels like we haven't mentioned his name in a little bit. But here's the thing. He is consistently getting after the quarterback. This is a great shot, by the way, to 95.
Derek Brown and Quinn Williams.
Number 3 overall pick in 2019 on your right-hand side. On your left-hand side, the number 7 overall pick out of Auburn. That's a little rivalry right there. Yeah. Auburn, the Iron Bowl here between Auburn and Alabama. That's the best way we can close out Training Camp Live, presented by Honda. We'll be back live here tomorrow, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Same crew, couple special guests. You don't want to miss it. Make sure to check out NewYorkJets.com for all your coverage here in Spartanburg.